A foggy old bridge where restless spirits wander, a popular rural college whose campus is chock full of urban legends and scary stories, and a blood-soaked battlefield where the apparitions of soldiers lost in brutal combat linger await on this list of some of the most haunted places in Arkansas. Let's get rolling. Hey guys, and thanks for joining me on this journey through some of the most haunted places in the land of opportunity, or Arkansas. Recognized for its breathtaking nature expanses, extreme weather, and good old-fashioned folk music, Arkansas also boasts a ridiculous number of ghost stories, old hill legends, and tales of the otherworldly. Are you ready to get started? Our first haunt takes us to the Arkansas-Oklahoma border to Fort Smith's iconic Judge Isaac C. Parker Federal Building. The Judge Isaac C. Parker Federal Building, or the Fort Smith U.S. Post Office and Courthouse, which is located in Fort Smith, Arkansas, is a historic government structure that derives its moniker from the famous hanging Judge Isaac C. Parker, whose bounds are shrouded in a number of ghost stories and claims of encounters with the supernatural. Historically, from the early 19th century and onward, Fort Smith, which was placed on the Butterfield Overland Mail Route, had earned a reputation as being the end of civilization and a gateway to the West, and as such, the landscape could get quite rough and rowdy from time to time, resulting in a mess of criminal activity. During this era, the aforementioned Judge Isaac C. Parker would uphold the law ferociously and would try near 13,000 cases over a span of just 21 years, sentencing no less than 160 individuals to death. With the rising need for a more formal court setting, in 1887, the government would allocate $100,000 for the construction of a new court building, which was completed by 1889, and from which the hanging judge would continue the twilight years of his work career predating his retirement. Sadly, Parker, who was afflicted with kidney disease, would pass on in 1896 at the age of only 58, but his lethal legacy would live on. From 1936 to 1937, a new courthouse, which is actually our current building, was constructed, while the old 1889 version was demolished entirely. In 1964, two wings were added to the main structure, and on December 13th of 1999, the site would be added to the National Register of Historic Places. The Judge Isaac C. Parker Federal Building remains open to this day and is active in government proceedings. And while it no longer harbors the ominous reputation of being a place where people were sent to die, its bounds are tied to a number of local legends and ghost stories, with officials, attorneys, clients, and visitors reporting a host of inexplicable activity, including doors that swing open and closed on their own, extreme cold spots, and instances of objects sighted moving around inexplicably. The looming ghost of Judge Parker himself is believed to haunt the site, forever keeping an eye over lawful proceedings. Incidentally, his apparition has been sighted in various rooms, has been felt by many, and is fond of making his presence known with the disembodied sounds of a gavel. Conversely, the souls of the many he sentenced to death are also believed to remain, forever serving out their sentences from beyond the grave, and several have told of chilling run-ins with prisoners who appear terrified or whose necks are visibly broken, that linger for mere moments before fading away. Our second haunt lands us in the heart of Arkansas, at Little Rock's Mount Holly Cemetery. The Mount Holly Cemetery, which is situated out of Little Rock, Arkansas, is an iconic burying grounds acting as final resting place to a number of notable names from the state's history that has long been surrounded in tales of supernatural occurrences and inexplicable phenomena. Historically, predating the creation of this aged graveyard, burials local to the Little Rock area were carried out both on private plots and on a public, albeit informal, potter's field placed right near the federal building off of Capitol Avenue and Gaines Street. Seeing the need for a more formal cemetery, however, on February 23rd of 1843, prominent citizens Chester Ashley and one Roswell Beebe, who is not pictured, would deed lands for the purpose of the creation of such a yard, on which a handful of graves predating Mount Holly itself were actually moved or reconstructed entirely on site. Over the years, while Mount Holly would accommodate future burials, the yard itself was unkempt, and in 1877, a group of local businessmen would create a cemetery cemetery commission dedicated to the property's upkeep that would operate for just under 40 years, until eventually a group of local women spoke up about their feelings regarding this commission not exactly pulling their weight. Subsequently, following the June 1915 adoption of City Ordinance No. 2199, the Ladies' Mount Holly Cemetery Association was incorporated by July 20th of the same year, and actually continues its function into the present. In more recent times, Mount Holly has grown into something of a local landmark. It was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1970 and actually earned itself the nickname of being the Westminster Abbey of Arkansas. Every year through October, Parkview Arts and Science Magnet High students participate in an event called Tales of the Crypt, in which they are all assigned persons buried within the cemetery and prepare a walkthrough tour with students dressed as said figures in order to educate any interested in the landscape's vast history. Sadly, on April 20th of 2016, the expanse would weather severe vandalism that resulted in massive damages and the toppling of significant headstones and markers, only further emphasizing the need for continued preservation of its bounds. The Mount Holly Cemetery remains open into the present and has grown in popularity amongst both history buffs and, interestingly enough, paranormal investigators, and rightfully so, as both staff and visitors through the years have reported strange light spy darting amongst the tombstones, phantom wafts of perfume, cologne, and tobacco smoke, and encounters with shadowy figures that stalk the living across the yard. Some tell that Mount Holly was established atop a former native burial ground, and incidentally, several tales tell of tribal chants heard on the winds, and of encounters with entities clad in traditional native attire, while others have described run-ins with spectral Confederate soldiers who often appear confused or even mournful. Several informal investigations of Mount Holly have yielded high EMF fluctuations and orbs or silhouettes captured in the backgrounds of photography and video, while others have detailed the disembodied sounds of a flute heard floating on the winds. Lastly, this weathered old burying grounds plays host to a particularly odd phenomenon in which graves or markers are known to move around the yard after dark, changing the layout to such an extent that several have become confused or even turned around and unable to find their ways to the exit. And on to number 3, which has us skirting the northern end of the state and crossing the infamous Cotter Bridge. Cotter Bridge, or the R.M. Ruthven Bridge, or the White River Concrete Arch Bridge, which carries U.S. Route 62 across the White River in Baxter County, Arkansas, is an iconic construct that sports the title of being the only bridge in the state constructed under the prominent Marsh Engineering Company of Des Moines, Iowa. Its bounds have long been tied to a range of paranormal activity and tales of the inexplicable. Historically, following the founding of the small railroad town of Cotter in 1905, the area would initially utilize a ferry system to cross the White River. However, the current was notorious for rising and falling with surprising speed, resulting in this ferry system being somewhat unreliable, and in the county demanding a bridge, no matter the cost or toll associated. Eventually, U.S. Route 62 would replace Arkansas Highway 12 through the area, and amidst a boom in tourism to the Ozarks, interest in the bridge would increase rapidly, though the endeavor would lack funding until 1927, when the state approved the use of toll bridges that would evolve into free bridges once their debts were paid. Later the same year, one Judge R.M. Ruthven would form a report that likely would have resulted in the bridge being built elsewhere. However, he wouldn't end up sending said report through until 2 decades later, and on May 2nd of 1928, President Calvin Coolidge would sign off on the construction of our current Cotter Bridge. Construction of this bridge would be contracted out to a company from Nashville, Tennessee, who would begin the task through the use of local labor, and that would utilize a cable system to avoid issues that might be caused by the Mercurial River. Incidentally, this company would install lights and would work day and night in order to complete the project in record time, and on November 11th of 1930, the crossing was officially dedicated. Despite long-standing demands from the local populace, however, once complete, many continued to use the free ferry system as opposed to paying the toll required on the bridge, and at one point, the highway department would even threaten to pull funding unless residents of Cotter began using the bridge regularly. Over the years, several proposals to replace the Cotter Bridge were voiced. However, locals to the area would oppose said proposals, and eventually, a new bridge was constructed to the north. In 1986, the Cotter Bridge was recognized as a National Historic Civil Engineering Landmark, and in 1990, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places. While the Cotter Bridge remains a popular route over the White to this day and acts as a symbol of the area's expansive history, it also totes a much darker legacy, one wrought with ghost stories and first-hand accounts of experiences with the unknown. And motorists crossing its bounds, especially after dark, have reported strange voices heard through car radios, odd rapping and scratching noises on the roofs of their moving vehicles, and instances of well-maintained rigs stalling out, leaving terrified drivers stranded right in the middle of the bridge. Activity is claimed to get much stronger during heavy fogs, and those driving the route in said weather conditions have described glancing out their windows and sighting ghostly forms moving about the mists, or even surrounding them threateningly. Several informal investigations of Cotters have yielded high EMF levels and chilling EVPs, and some tell that the chains of 4 prisoners who died either on or under the bridge can be heard rattling from somewhere just out of sight. Lastly, easily the most famous local legend is that of the laughing lady on the bridge, who it's believed is a witch, or maybe even the ghost of a witch, and who's been known to float around wildly, cackling over motorists' heads. Disturbingly, it's believed this manifestation has actually taken a handful of people, who have been whisked away to God knows where, never to be seen or heard from again. Our fourth haunt has us enrolling at Arkadelphia's prestigious Henderson State University. Henderson State University, which is placed in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, is a public school system recognized as the state's only university which has been controlled through time by both the church and the state. Its campus plays host to a number of eerie local legends and spine-tingling ghost stories. Historically, on November 6th of 1889, Arkadelphia civic leaders and members of the Methodist Episcopal Church South would hold a meeting to discuss the forming of a Methodist college for the locale and for all of South Arkansas for that matter. And while at one point they aimed to acquire the pre-established Hendrix College, when this plan fell through, it would result in the group setting to work on their own unique institution. On March 24th of 1890, this school was officially founded as the Arkadelphia Methodist College, which was chartered as a 4-year coeducational baccalaureate liberal arts college, and which would open its doors on September 3rd of the same year to all of 110 students and 10 faculty members. In 1904, this school would be altered to the Henderson College in honor of prominent local businessman and trustee Charles Henderson. In 1911, this name was amended as Henderson Brown College to honor another trustee, one Walter William Brown, and until 1925, the site would additionally act as an academy. In 1929, and for a short time after, it was proposed that Henderson merge with Hendrix in Little Rock, Arkansas. However, Arkadelphia citizens and religious institutions would oppose this merger, and would instead offer the school up to the state. Subsequently, the Arkansas General Assembly would enact legislation to establish a teachers' college in Arkadelphia, and Henderson would be officiated as a daughter of the state. Oh, and more recently, and for any Breaking Bad fans in the house, through October of 2019, police would actually respond to complaints of a strange odor at the Reynolds Science Center, after which investigations would yield elevated levels of benzyl chloride along with, and we're not kidding about this next part, methamphetamine residue, which resulted in the arrests of 2 chemistry professors who were literally cooking crystal. So yeah, that actually happened. Like a host of other schools we've covered in the past, Henderson State University is no stranger to campus legends and tales of the otherworldly, and both faculty and students across its bounds have reported doors that open and close by themselves, disembodied voices and footsteps that emanate from empty spaces, and encounters with shadowy figures that stalk the campus after dark. The Evans Recital Hall is surrounded by some of the school's most popular ghost stories, and within, students have told of objects that move on their own, of strange temperature fluctuations, and of musical instruments that play by themselves. One particularly eerie account comes from a music major who describes staying in the hall late into the night to practice trombone, and of the lights in the back of the room suddenly dimming before shutting off entirely, leaving only the stage illuminated. Thinking there's some sort of malfunction, this student turned the lights back on, but no sooner had they returned to the stage when all of the lights in the front room turned off entirely, resulting in instant goosebumps and in the major fleeing the building. Lastly, the most famous Henderson ghost story claims that long ago, a student from the school fell in love with a girl from a rival college. Sadly, this young man's friends proceeded to make fun of him relentlessly, until, under their pressure, he ended up cutting things off with the girl. Heartbroken, it's said that she took her own life in despair, leaving her restless spirit to linger. To this day, many believe her soul returns to the campus through homecoming week, during which time she has been known to manifest as a terrifying woman in black who appears in various buildings or outside, always scaring those nearby briefly before fading away. Our fifth and final hunt takes us to northwestern Arkansas to the historic Pea Ridge National Military Park. The Pea Ridge National Military Park, which is located within Benton County in Arkansas, is an iconic U.S. battlefield preserving the site of a former Civil War confrontation that resulted in a significant Union victory, whose blood-soaked bounds are shrouded in a slew of chilling ghost stories and claims of encounters with the otherworldly. Historically, through late 1861 and early 1862, Union forces had pushed what was known as the Confederate Missouri State Guard, which was led by Major General Sterling Price, out of its own state, following which, by spring of 1862, Federal Brigadier General Samuel R. Curtis would lead his Army of the Southwest after the Confederates, in an attempt to push them into Arkansas. As the two parties moved through Arkansas, Price would withdraw his troops down Wire Road, with Curtis not far on his tail. As the two parties moved through Arkansas, Price would withdraw his troops down Wire Road, with Curtis hot on his trail, and the Federal and Confederate forces would clash a number of times right near Potts Hill and Little Sugar Creek, after which Curtis, whose supply lines were few and far in between, would decide to dig in on the northern banks of the creek and wait for what he felt was an imminent Confederate assault. During this hole-up, Price and his men would evacuate Fayetteville and would set up camp within the Boston Mountains, and Confederate Major General Earl Van Doren, who'd been appointed as overall commander of the Trans-Mississippi District, would rally forces he deemed necessary to confront Curtis's Federals. On March 4th of 1862, Van Dorn would force his 16,500 men to march for 3 days without supplies in order to confront Curtis's 10,000 or so troops, who were still comfortably fortified in position, resulting in the Confederate line arriving to Bentonville cold, tired, hungry, and spread out. The Battle of Bentonville, or by some accounts the Battle of the Elkhorn Tavern, which was an important center of combat during the chaos, would transpire from March 7th through the 8th, and would result in a resounding Union and Federal victory, with casualties on the Union side totaling 203 killed, 980 wounded, and 201 missing, and casualties on the Confederate side not reported accurately, but estimated at well over 2,000, with somewhere between 800 and 1,000 killed. Ultimately, this confrontation would allow Union control over most of Missouri and northern Arkansas. More recently, in 1956, Arkansas would designate Pea Ridge as a national military park under Congress, and in 1963, and through the American Civil War centennial, it was also in itself officialized as a standard national park. In the present, the Pea Ridge Battlefield remains open to the public as a popular historic site, offering tours and viewings of the area as well as a fully restored Elkhorn Tavern. Surprising exactly no one, the whole of this weathered park has long been surrounded in reports of supernatural activity resulting from the battle hosted there so long ago, and both staff and visitors have reported extreme cold patches felt in adverse weather, strange fogs that envelop the area alone, and encounters with both shadowy figures and the full-bodied apparitions of soldiers who are sometimes locked in battle, and who appear so solid that they are often mistaken for actors before they fade away into nothingness. Several have described being brushed up against, pushed, or feeling as if they're being followed by someone or something unseen, while others have told of instances of personal electronics behaving erratically, or of well-maintained vehicles refusing to start entirely, leaving them stranded on site. The Elkhorn Tavern itself is said to act as an epicenter to otherworldly activity experienced. Incidentally, several investigations of its bounds have yielded high EMF levels, chilling EVPs, orbs captured in photography, and hits on both thermal grids and communicative devices, while others have told of objects sighted moving around on their own, doors and windows that open and close by themselves, accounts of personal effects that go missing and turn up later in odd places, and phantom wafts of tobacco smoke without source. Lastly, and confined to no area in particular, are documentations of phantom musket fire, the clash of small arms, ghostly cries and shouts, and the lingering scent of gunpowder, all that play testament to the blood, sweat, and tears that were shed right here in the name of civil freedom. Thanks for joining me on this exploration of some of Arkansas's most haunted places. If you enjoyed hearing my histories and ghost stories, subscribe to my channel, throw this upload a like, and share me with anyone you feel could use a good scare. I'll see you all next time.